This is the New Alliance Talk, Hamburg Declaration on Responsible AI for the SDGs. Please welcome to the stage Holger Stark from Die Zeit.
Good afternoon, Excellencies, Ministers, distinguished guests, colleagues and friends. Welcome back to the second half of this first day of the Hamburg Sustainability Conference. I hope you all had a productive and inspiring lunch. Welcome to this high-level panel discussion at the 2025 Hamburg Sustainability Conference. My name is Holger Stark. I'm working for the German weekly Die Zeit. It is no overstatement to say that we are at a pivotal moment in time. AI is reshaping our world, but how we govern and how we apply it will determine whether it accelerates progress towards the sustainability development goals or if it deepens existing inequalities. That's why we're here to discuss and to spotlight the Hamburg Declaration on Responsible AI for the SDGs, the first international multi-stakeholder declaration of its kind. The declaration is the result of a broad, inclusive consultation from the Paris AI Action Summit to the Internet Governance Forum, and its goal is to set the tone for the upcoming debate. It's now my great honor to introduce our panel of today's global leaders and innovators, each deeply engaged in shaping responsible AI. Please welcome on stage Achim Steiner, head of the United Nations Development Programme. Bärbel Kofler, Parliamentary State Secretary of the German Federal Ministry for Economic Cooperation and Development, BMZ. Veronica Nduva, Secretary General of the East African Community. Rumman Chowdhury, CEO of Humane Intelligence. And Irene Mwendwa, Executive Director of Pollicy. And let's dive straight into the discussion. Achim Steiner, the key word here is responsible AI. What is responsible AI for you, and why is a responsible way of dealing with AI so crucial?
Well, let me start by using a phrase I used in the opening session this morning. When we talk about AI, very often we seem to oscillate between utopia and dystopia. I think responsible AI is one way of answering those who either think that this technology is the ultimate liberation of humanity, or those who think that it may unleash the darkest forces in humanity. And therefore, responsibility is, first of all, a notion that you try and understand that a technology can do good and it can do harm. We are introducing ethical principles, human rights principles. We are looking at environmental sustainability because an AI economy has very significant implications for environment, for our natural resources. But we're also introducing a notion that this conference is all about, which is you cannot think of an AI future without thinking internationally, without thinking globally, but also in terms of involving those who maybe are inventing and developing AI, those who are regulating the AI environment, and indeed that universe of potential users. And finally, as a head of the United Nations Development Programme, you will not be surprised that a significant part of our focus is on how to ensure that AI becomes, if it indeed becomes this universal accelerator of development, augmenting human capacity, that it doesn't exclude most of humanity because it didn't have the money at the beginning of the race. And therefore, we need to also create an AI economy, an ecosystem that allows even those who may not be the wealthiest to be part of it, and not to allow ourselves to go down an oligarch economy again, as we have seen with other technologies.
Thank you very much, Achim Steiner. Let me pass the torch to Veronica Nduva. How do you define, from your perspective, a responsible way of dealing with AI? No, let me take first, Veronica.
Thank you so much for the question. The East African community represents 300 million citizens. 60% of those are youth, and therefore big consumers of technology, big consumers of AI. So to me, AI is all about making responsible decisions. When we talk about AI and our youth, we are thinking their education, we are thinking our culture, our diversity, our democracy. Our youth are very active in politics. So AI has been defined by Steve Masiyiwa, our biggest tech person in Africa, founder of Econet, as enhancing human capabilities. But for me, it's taking it further. It's enhancing human capabilities responsibly, ensuring that we are doing the right thing, we are saying the right thing, we are accessing the right data, and we are part of the decision making. It's responsible AI is all about having everyone at the table.
Thank you very much. Bärbel Kofler, from a governmental perspective, responsible AI, what can the government contribute and how do you see it?
Well, what we're doing here is one idea how we can contribute as a government to come up with bringing together those who want to act responsible. So the one thing is what we are organizing here is collecting endorsement, collecting people, institutions, countries to come together and talk exactly what you were saying, talk about responsible AI, because it's at the end of the day, it's the question who is shaping AI, who is collecting the data, in which language the whole thing is published, and so on and so on. So being really responsible and sensitive to the possibilities, but that it has to be inclusive. That's something we can promote. That's what we're doing here, also with the Hamburg Declaration on artificial intelligence, but it shouldn't stop only by talking about it or coming up with a memorandum, but really that everybody who is joining that declaration is also coming up with commitments he or she or the institution themselves will fulfill. And that means, of course, also we as a government, as a ministry, we're coming up with commitments. For example, open source sharing data on climate and climate protection, and do that open source and bring that into artificial intelligence so it can be used by everybody. It doesn't mean then it's only monopolized or used by a few with a certain interest. So that is a thing we can work on as a government.
Thank you very much, State Secretary. Rumman, you're more looking at it from a private perspective, from a founder's perspective. What's your take, also given what the State Secretary said about commitments by the governments?
Yeah, that's a great question. And sort of building on my colleagues' points, what we need is a wide range of perspectives. We need policymakers in the room, right? We need NGOs in the room. What's critically important is to build the technology to scale that. At Humane Intelligence, we build test and evaluation tools at scale. Our goal and our mission is twofold. One is to create the avenues for accountability. So when a model is built, it is deployed into, the West African community. How can these young people that you have mentioned actually give feedback to ensure these models are being built fit for purpose for them? So for me, responsible AI is twofold. One is how do you empower people to build that accountability chain with the model developers? And number two, how do you encourage the ecosystem to be more diverse in the ecosystem we have today?
Thank you very much, Rumman. And finally, Irene, how do you see that? How can that happen?
So I lead and work for an organization that looks at who owns the data and who owns and runs some of these companies. And I don't know if any one of you in the room knows how many AI companies there are in the world. There are about 40 companies that run and manage AIs in the world, and none of those are registered or work in Africa. So civil society or civic tech organizations, of course, consider responsible AI from a point of a contextual understanding of data ecosystems, so that we can see how citizens play a role and are also able to see their clear picture in the whole data ecosystem, and to ensure that, of course, the AI and data is tailored to the African context. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you. So this all comes together in the Hamburg Declaration on responsible AI. Achim Steiner, how long did you work on that declaration and why is it so important for you?
Well, as you no, this is a process that began well before this Hamburg Sustainability Conference through a number of international fora. I would say probably a better part of a year, because it is the first time that we are trying to bring a diverse set of actors together. This is a field that is changing almost every day in terms of the constituency as it defines itself, but also the issues that are there. And I think what has been important from our point of view is to not allow the use of data to be driven by, as I said this morning, a techno-determinist view. I think what is so critical is that in these discussions, and as we heard from the panel just now, it's the demand that should drive really the way that AI will become part of every aspect of our lives. And at this point in time, we look at this also as breakthrough opportunities that are defined by urgent needs. Take drug discovery, for example. Many of the illnesses around the world today are not necessarily commercially interesting enough for pharmaceutical companies to invest in actual drug development because it's very costly. AI has revolutionized the way we can turn drug discovery upside down, massively lowering the cost, opening up opportunities for new entrants, and therefore changing the face of global medicine, if you want, for poorer countries or for diseases that are particular to poorer regions or tropical regions of the world. The other part is how we can take these ideas that are, in a sense, in the declaration, and as you said, Bärbel, the declaration is also an invitation for individual organizations to add their own commitments to this. So it's an open-ended, if you want, approach. But to us, it's a commitment. As UNDP, we have now invested with Italy and also the European Commission joining now in an AI hub for sustainable development. That will be the platform on which we can engage with countries to quickly develop what is here a kind of declaratory intent into practical support.
How complicated, Veronica, was it to bring together the different perspectives from East Africa, for example, the German perspective, the European one, into this declaration?
No, I think from my standpoint, the declaration really is a great opportunity because it provides us with an opportunity as the regional economic community to ensure that there is more inclusion, that our voices, again, are being heard. So I wouldn't say, so first I would like to say straight up that we've been working very closely with the German government on this area of AI. We have the East African Community Alliance on AI. And why this is important and why it's also been difficult is because our countries are at very different stages when it comes to AI development. Of the 8 countries, for instance, only Kenya, my country, and Rwanda have developed AI strategies. So the other 6 are yet to develop that. So our policies remain fragmented. Our regulatory environment still has a bit of a challenge. And therefore, more than ever, looking at the 5 principles around the declaration, then do you see the need? Putting, for us, people at the center is very, very important. Protecting our data is really critical. I'd also want to say peace for us is very important. We know that our continent, both conflict and also democratization processes can be very severely hampered when we have irresponsible AI because we have disinformation, misinformation, our elections are under threat, are vulnerable to distorted data. And therefore, that putting people and peace at the center is important. But also, let me talk about our planet, Africa. When we talk about climate change, we've seen the opportunities that the focus is here because the severity of climate impact is felt within our region. And therefore, deploying positive strategies, deploying initiatives, and like I said, with great partnerships such as we have with the GIZ, we've been able to have like pandemic surveillance, digital innovations in the right crop quality and seeding. So overall, I would say that the declaration is really important because human rights, our integrity, our democracy, our continent and our region and our youth are all important resources that we must protect. And therefore, there is a bridge to the inequalities that we see.
You mentioned a couple of problems. Can you give us a practical understanding how you can use AI to tackle those?
To tackle the problems?
Yes.
Well, so for instance, if I want to put on the same plate between AI and some of the SDGs that we are focusing on, I would be able, for instance, we have solutions. Let me talk about the solutions that we found. For instance, we have pandemic preparedness across the region by deploying AI tools in surveilling diseases that are across the border. So we were able to manage diseases like Mpox and Marburg, and to a large extent, we were really the front leaders in managing COVID, and this was done by deploying the technologies. We've also seen deployment of AI technologies in agriculture, and this has led to food solutions, which are a problem to us. But I think there is more opportunity. We are left behind. The modeling, the models of AI do not capture us. When we talk about the digital divide, I think with AI, it's even deeper. When we talk about, I said we are 8 countries, perhaps for stating them, there is Kenya, Uganda, Tanzania. Doing okay in terms of their economies. We have Rwanda, we have Burundi, DRC, Federal Republic of Somalia, and the South Sudan. Those are some of the countries that have conflict. And with the wrong deployment of AI, then we will only entrench further this kind of conflict. So for us, it's important that our data is used responsibly. And we have to educate our youth because people do not know. So AI is this grand thing that is available, and we tap into this resource without knowing what the impact of it has. So it's been said in our forums that AI should not stand for African ignorance.
Good point.
Yeah, I'll just
Good
give
point.
that.
Yeah, I think it speaks for itself.
Thank you.
Bärbel Kofler, you spoke about commitments that come along with the declaration. Tell us a little bit more what that means, for example, for the government of Germany.
Well, for us, it means, well, there are 3 really points where we, especially as BMZ, can get engaged. One is the technology knowledge. That is very important. You were discussing the gap in between those who have access or can use and those who can't. But it's more than only informing people how to use a technology. It starts already with the access to energy, to be honest. Last year we had on a panel here a young lady from Ghana. She was talking about, well, you're talking about AI and 50% of my continent don't have access to electricity. So at the end of the day, it's also this gap where we have remote areas versus centers. It's a gap in between male and female. So we have to think about those gaps in a broad sense and the knowledge gap. And that's something where my ministry can be engaged and is engaged. It's about discussing with partner countries about regulatory frameworks, because at the end of the day, in the countries, there has to be clear what is allowed, what is a society agreeing on, how should it look like, and how a fair artificial intelligence system should be implemented. And the third thing is very important to me. Again, I mentioned that it's about data, because it was said already how unfair data can be, how in creative artificial intelligence is sometimes to make up something. If there's not enough data available, they make up things. And that's even the nice thing. You can manipulate with that. So you need data, and you need data which is not only available, in German, English, or French, but is available in the local languages. To feed that in, to get local information in the system, so it can be used then by the algorithm to produce something which is relevant for countries in various areas on this planet. So what we are doing as a ministry, and that's why I'm pointing that out, is trying to break down also language barriers. So we support at the moment this access in languages like Kinyarwanda, Kiswahili, and Uganda. And of course, that's the millions, not the hundreds of languages more, which would be relevant, but you have to have a starting point. And to talk about that it shouldn't be biased on the knowledge we have, or we are thinking what is right, but we get the knowledge from the African continent, for example, also fit in. That's one thing. And we use that data, as it was pointed out, for systems to support. Is it for the health system, for example, you can do a lot in information spreading, in organizing, in pandemic prevention. You can use it for forecast of droughts, for example, in the agricultural system. You can give information to farmers, modeling things. And last point, I was just coming back from the annual meeting of the African Development Bank last week in Côte d'Ivoire, and there was a panel of young African entrepreneurs, mostly ladies, by the way. Very, very bravely used artificial intelligence for their business ideas. And that was from the agricultural sector to getting blended financing tools for small and medium enterprises on the continent. So it was a big range of topics, and you can use that also for that if you're really thoughtful and mindful of what you're doing and don't leave it only to a few.
Rumman, from the perspective of the private sector, how can companies contribute to the declaration? What is the thing that private companies can contribute?
That's a great question. So one thing that really strikes me as very positive about this, about the declaration, is combining the sustainability impact of these models with the actual production and development. Often in companies, these kinds of practices, building it and dealing with the consequences, are completely siloed from each other. So what the declaration does is puts it all together. As Humane Intelligence, we've actually committed to do multiple of our bias bounty programs. We host these global challenges. Each has $10,000 in prizes to encourage individuals from all over the world to be part of the algorithmic auditing and assessment community. So that inclusivity in that language is quite helpful. We're also very excited to be partnering with the UNDP to do, sort of scale up this work and do a bit more. And I'm optimistic that companies will be more engaged in also being in the global majority, being part of these very important and holistic conversations.
Yeah, Irene, do you share that? And do you have anything in addition to add how the private sector can combine its knowledge and bring it together?
Yeah, and it's just to concur with what everyone has said and confirm that the UNDP-led Hamburg Declaration gives us hope for a global AI future in the wake of, hoping that Africa will also own its own AI companies, and to also echo what Humane Intelligence is doing by sharing opportunities for algorithmic justice to ensure redistribution of power. And this way, our local languages will be included, our African values and African contexts, because in civil society, we advocate a lot for openness, and in doing so, we are hoping to see local communities being engaged. So far, through the country of Kenya and other countries in Africa, we've been hoping for some tax exemptions on some of the data centers that we would hope to see in our continent. I know Smart Africa is in the room, and the AU is also conducting massive digital studies on how artificial intelligence can be of proper use in Africa. So really to welcome the Hamburg Declaration in ensuring a global AI future, and that is rooted in justice. Thank you.
Achim Steiner, one of the pillars of the declaration is to promote peace. On one hand, AI can do a lot to promote peace. On the other hand, it's one of the drivers of modern warfare. How do you deal with that tension and that difficulty?
I think, as we have done with every invention in human history, it is in the nature of almost any object, whether it's a hammer, a car, an arrow, a gun, a drone, or now AI, to be weaponized or to be used for the benefit of humanity. And I think what we have to very quickly appreciate is that this is not just a control of physical risks. One of the extraordinary new dimensions, I think, with AI is that we're dealing here with a form of artificial intelligence, large language models and so on that, can learn at a pace that exceeds, I think, what we have seen in the last few years all over the world. Governments are scrambling to regulate a, let's say, technological frontier that is changing its both nature and scope almost on a daily basis. And I think one of the things that we have to quickly appreciate is we need to learn from one another. If every country individually tries to develop its own regulatory framework, it'll never catch up, most likely, and it cannot learn from the best practice that is there. which is why the Secretary General at the Summit of the Future last year put forward a global digital compact. I mean, the idea was not that, in New York you regulate what happens in the world of AI or digital, but that nations commit to the platforms and the protocols and ultimately the objectives of working together. So I think the first answer has to be countries have to work together. Otherwise, you're not going to control or mitigate that risk of weaponization of artificial intelligence. The second part is perhaps a little bit more complex because and I just asked to show you this report. This is the Human Development Report issued just a few weeks ago entitled A Matter of Choice, People and Possibilities in the Ages of AI. What it basically says is we need to develop a complementarity economy. Otherwise, yes, AI can simply become analogous to digital automation, a displacement tool. But actually, if governments, societies, markets commit to developing AI as a tool that augments and complements human intelligence, to use that term for a moment, then I think we have a chance to also be far more proactive about containing the risks of abuse. And in the end, however, let's be very honest, we have to protect ourselves as a society. We have to protect individuals from abuse. I mean, my colleagues here can speak to all sorts of aspects we already heard. This is where governments have got to get their act together. And we as a society have to give governments the mandate to provide, just as they have done in history, the laws, the jurisprudence, and the fundamental rights that need to be protected in an age of AI.
Bärbel Kofler, give us an insight how difficult it is or how easy it is to convince other governments to endorse the Hamburg Declaration.
Well, I think it's not the challenge to convince governments, especially in our partnerships on the Global South or in our partner countries, because the need for framework and for regulatory, I think, is seen. What I said before and what I heard from my colleagues, that it has to be a fair access in shaping AI. That's something we discussed, because I think that's an important point. And it's more the issue than with those who are at the moment the front runners, technology, tech concerns, and big players around the globe who are not really interested in this democratization of artificial intelligence. The problem is not the governments around the globe. They want to have a regulation, and I think they want to have a framework which fits to their societies and it's fitting to their background. So that's why I think what we are trying to do here with the Hamburg Declaration, with the help of UNDP, partner countries, private sector, science, to whom NGOs, to whom it may concern and want to join, is so important to convince those who at the moment only see it as a mere business model and don't think about positive and negative aspects, and that we have to frame it to convince them. We need a big solidarity amongst all those who see that we want to use the good things, but that we have to enhance the challenges coming with artificial intelligence, and therefore we need things like that declaration.
Veronica M, Achim Steiner spoke about democratizing AI. Almost all relevant and big players are based in the West. From your perspective, how can we balance that better? And are those private companies at the end listening to your demands?
This is me.
Oh, sorry, that thing was for you.
No, Veronica.
Oh, it's for me.
No, to Veronica.
Oh, Veronica. Okay, thank you. No, it was very interesting just listening to the two perspectives, because certainly, and I was just reflecting, when we talk about the advancements on digital technology, we can't compare back to the days before. I was sitting in the beautiful hall earlier and looking at the ships and the sailing, and you had to wait for months and years for a ship to leave Europe to get to Africa. But now for anything to leave Europe to get to Africa, it's instant. Our children in Africa want the latest trends in Europe. So how do you bridge that divide? Because technology is here. And for me, I think the challenge is in a holistic approach. Why do I say holistic? It has been mentioned here, basic things. I'd like to walk with us. We are in a universe where in some places within our region, there is no bandwidth. You know, we are talking about AI, we are talking about sometimes 3G access. So the DPI investment, I think there is a need to immerse ourselves in the realities of the digital divide that is there. And from that perspective, then lead conversations that consult, that co-create, that cooperate, that bringing us together at the table and asking us, how are you guys and what can we do together? Instead of, here is a model we've developed, use it. And that way we'll be able to factor in what has been said here. What are our cultures? What are our practices? I used to talk a little bit about culture, and in our country, in our region, lunchtime, so 2 o'clock in Africa is any time after lunch. And morning is any time before lunch. So when I tell you I'm going to meet you at 2 o'clock, it means I will meet you any time after I've had lunch. So that's just a simple example of our cultural differences, because here 2 o'clock means 2 o'clock on the dot. So that's just a simple example of saying that when we are creating solutions, let us bring people to the table. Let us understand that we are at very different levels of development. When we are talking about digital highways, in our region, we are looking for highways that cars drive on. When we are talking about the data centers and the cooling and what is needed, we still have water problem. We still have electricity problem. All those are key ingredients to safeguarding data centers. So all I'm saying is that the ingredients are many, the challenges are diverse. If we are to move together, and together we must move, then it is important that we co-create together. It's important that we consult each other. And then we will see the prosperity that comes with advances in digital technology such as AI.
Rumman, how can we divide that? How can we bridge that divide?
That's a wonderful question. I want to build on your amazing example. I know you gave kind of a comical anecdote, but I want to give you a real-world example. So last year, Humane Intelligence worked with the Singapore IMDA, that's their Infocom authority, to test all the major large language models for multilingual and multicultural biases across all of ASEAN, so 9 different languages. So how we work is we don't think that technologists are the experts. We think that the people with the lived experience, they're the experts. So we flew in sociologists, linguists, cultural experts from 9 different countries to Singapore to use our platform to test all the different language models for things like cultural awareness, even geographic bias. So when the United States talks about bias, we might talk about race bias, we could talk about gender bias, we on occasion talk about class bias, but we never talk about caste bias because the US doesn't think about these questions. We don't think about geographic bias in the same way that it would be in other countries. And so your example is very valid, and we tested for these kinds of things. So when we think about how do we hold companies accountable, how can the global majority be part of the conversation, an agenda setter versus just a recipient, these are the ways we do so. So when we think about DPI, the UNDP has been doing amazing work on DPI. There's so many partners in the room. One thing we encourage and we promote is DPI is more than just data, access to compute, access to models. DPI also includes tests and evaluation. And frankly, even at the major large language model companies and the AI companies, they also ignore test and evaluation. Security, responsible use always comes later, but we hope that a more inclusive vision also includes a vision in which we're also including test and evaluation with a broad range of communities as a standard part of the model development conversation rather than as an afterthought.
Thank you very much. And Irene, finally, how can such a declaration impact the daily life? How can translate it into concrete actions?
Definitely from the point of access to data, think about African governments and access to data. Think about startup communities. Veronica can tell you how the East Africans are vibrant in terms of the startup community and civil society accessing data. We think of this from a public policy issue or as a public right, where if every one of us in the room can access platform data, as she has been pointing out, we're able to give better evaluation reports that will make these private companies improve their models and improve some of the technologies they're designing. But we also think of this from a point of, we contribute this data to these platforms, so they need to give us back our data. Thank you.
Thank you very much. for our panelists for the thoughtful insights. You've clearly shown the urgency and also the opportunities that lay before us. As we come to close of this session, I'd like to underscore one simple truth. AI is probably the biggest challenge, but also the biggest opportunity at the same time for mankind in the 21st century. And we will need more efforts like today's and like those of the Hamburg Declaration to address it. I now want to invite all endorsing parties, all governments, all companies, all those of you who endorsed already the Hamburg Declaration to come on stage for a group photo. So, yes, please don't be shy.
Yes, I hope.
Come up and join the group here. Yes.
Hi, how are you?
Thank you.
Hallo, gut. Bist du da? Ich bin auch, ich bin geweiert.
Well done.
Thank you.
Mention UNDP.
Achim Steiner, würden Sie einmal das Schild?
Ja, sollen wir?
So.
Do you want to move up?
We have already
Share this.
more than 30 endorsers of the declaration, and I see that a significant
Okay.
number of them is here. Maybe you try to arrange yourself for the photo opportunity. Okay, that looks great.
Thank you.
So as said, we're around 35 endorsers already, including the government of the United Kingdom, the government of France and Germany, the UNDP, Wikimedia, Pollicy, as heard, but also the German digital tech company SAP, DECRA, and more. Thank you very much for being here, for doing this, and allow me some housekeeping remarks at the end. At 2 p.m., we invite all of you to room 151 in the Hamburg City Hall for the public endorsement moments, where we want to collect more of endorsers. The declaration will be formally endorsed by a broad coalition of governments, their international organizations, civil society, and private sector partners, and we will also be able to keep on going the discussion. Thank you very much. Appreciate you being here.